recovering CPA and a tech geek who's really good at the geek stuff. Here's a couple of fun facts I found from Forbes on LinkedIn, because we're going to spend a little time talking about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the single largest network tool in the history of modern business. LinkedIn has more than 562 million users in more than 200 countries and territories worldwide. Yet the average user only has 1,300 contacts. I'm not even close to that. In order to grow your LinkedIn community with quality members, you should put out valuable educational content. I don't do that. Whether it's getting a cup of coffee, meeting at a networking event like this, or doing something, you got to take your connections offline and do more than just click, I love you, here's a comment I have on your post. So Jason, tell us what we need to know. And oh, by the way, this is what the picture that's in my office. That's Jim. That's the bank.
All right, so the back of this thing is just kind of like the larger plan. And what I'm going to try to do is go through 3 critical issues. And I said 15, I'll let you go faster. And there's search engine rankings. Most people are concerned about that. Measure accountability. And then the last and most important is how to use LinkedIn in ways to grow your network. So the first thing is we will talk about search engine traffic. And the first thing is speeding up your website. So there is a website called GT Metrics, and it's free. You just type in a web page or your home page, and it gives you a score. This is Jim's website, and Jim got a B and a D. So this right here tells you things that you can give to your website developer to fix your site. This is one of the most critical things you can do for Google, is make sure that you're serving up fast pages. So next thing is what's under the hood. So if you think of the iceberg, what's above the water level is on the page. So schema architecture is something that came out a few years ago. You don't have to look so closely, but basically if you have a law office, for example, you can put in the address of your office. You can define your website content to be belonging to a law firm. So you can actually tell Google what type of website you have. If you have schema architecture, that also relates to seeing stars showing up on the Google listings next to your domain. So extremely important. Your website should fit all sizes, and the idea being very simply that you need to design for mobile phones first, especially depending on the type of business you're in. Like a restaurant, majority of your traffic will be on a phone rather than a big screen. So this is a Google URL. You can type in, again, a website address, and it will give you a score and tell you how well your website renders for a mobile phone, and it gives you all the things you need to do to fix it. So idea, and I can send out this package afterwards. Next thing is accessibility. So American Disabilities Act is kind of confusing whether you have to comply or not. There's 2 different competing statutes, but basically the rule of thumb is if you have a business that people come to your business, you probably need to get your website to comply so that people with disabilities can access your website. The lawsuits are just piling up. The lawyers have figured out there's a lot of money to make, and they're just hiring shill people that are blind, or even autism could qualify as having a disability to use a website. And so there are tools out there. So one of them is a thing called the Wave tool. So if you have the Firefox browser, you just download this plugin, you go to your web page, and you click on the Wave tool, and it actually gives you a score telling you the errors, alerts, features, stuff like that, so you can give it to your website developer, and that will get you half of the way to ADA compliance. Then there's other things that have to be done, but at the very least, you should comply with this tool. And by the way, ADA will mean like you can change the monochrome way the screen displays. If you're a blind person, you have a reader, it'll read the content out to you. So one of the main things you can do is if you have any image on your page, you have a description of every image, because the blind people can't see the images, but they can hear the descriptions. Okay, number 5 is kind of combining a bunch of factors, which is you have to have keywords in your content, the keywords that people search. But what's changed in the last year is it's almost like a website's becoming a production. There's a difference between having a long article on a topic versus having a produced article on the topic. So this is a client who has a medical malpractice law firm, and this is a long article that goes down, but if you see, we create graphs, there's a table of contents, and when you go down the page, there's all sorts of graphics that make the page much more interesting. So Google can actually interpret your page. So if you're used to writing articles, you can't just post 5 paragraphs or 10 paragraphs of text anymore. You have to actually go out and put some content in there, make the page look nice, and that improves both the readability of it and as well the Google's interpretation of the page. So last thing is you want to focus in on getting the leads. So the 2 things that I just isolated is, one, a lot of people do not put their phone number on the top navigation. I think it's the simplest, easiest thing to do. We go a step further. We didn't do it here, but we talk to clients about getting a vanity phone number. Even though it doesn't matter anymore, everybody has a cell phone, there's no such thing as long distance, pretty much. But when you have the name of a business or a value in your phone number, it's another chance to brand yourself. So that's one thing. And the second thing is, don't just have an email address on your website, use a form so that you can collect the information into like a CRM system. And the other thing is using online chat as well. So either way, you want to have more than just an email address. So those are the main things that relate to having what we'll call an optimal website. There's plenty more things to do, but in terms of accountability, the idea of who we accountable to most often, our spouse or partner. So the idea here is you want to measure the results of what you're doing. And so first thing is something called the heat map test. So you can actually put in a little piece of software on your website, and it follows the mouse as people are browsing each page. So the color coding, like the red is the hot zone. That's where people spend the most time on a page. So if you're trying to see how your web pages are doing, this is kind of a cool thing to do. Another thing is if you have people who are if your clients have people who are calling in to their website, there's a program called What Converts. It flashes a dynamic phone number, and it will tell you what page they were on, where your leads are coming from. So it's very cheap, maybe $20 a month to have something like that. Slido is a piece of software that integrates with your Google AdWords program, and it will give you all sorts of very cool reports to tell you how you're doing. These are 9 different metrics that you want to be on top of in terms of how much you're paying for clicks and things like that. So this is just interesting from a thing called SpyFu. You can feed in your different competitors and you can run like a Venn diagram to see what you have in common and what gaps you have in terms of the keywords that are in your website that Google sees. An analytics report, the idea here is, where's your traffic coming from? Is it from search engines? Is it people typing in your name? Is it from social media? So that's the most basic report in Google Analytics, and you have to make sure you're running Google Analytics. This is showing you the pages within your website that are producing the most traffic. Search Console, does everybody know what that is? No, okay, so it used to be called Google Webmaster. It's free. You just go to google.com webmaster, you sign up for an account, you verify that you own the account, you don't have to put code into the page, and Google will then actually tell you how your website is doing in terms of errors, pages getting picked up, pages getting ranked. Google Analytics and Search Console are extremely important. This is the most important page. It tells you the errors that you're seeing, that Google is seeing on the web page. And that will happen often because a website was linking to a page, you changed the page, and now that link is broken. Google will tell you about that.
Jason?
Yeah.
What's the piece about the competitor?
SpyFu is the website you can go to, SPYFU. Yeah, exactly. That was special for you. Free, I'll give you one. We didn't talk about the news, so apparently in Berkeley you can't reference manholes anymore.
Yeah.
I love that one, right? All right, so Facebook Analytics. There's another tool like Google Analytics. Facebook gives you a piece of code, and what Facebook does, it gives you a little bit more insight that Google isn't giving you. So if you're running both of them together, it's kind of cool because then you get a more comprehensive outlook. Okay, social media. I did very little on that here because it's a big black hole. The point on social media is just have some type of software if you're posting to Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that, just to see what it's actually producing in terms of traffic most of all and where you're getting engagement. Okay, so this is the big reason I came here. Relationship outreach, which is why we go to provisors. So we take the provisors concept and we push it online to then get it back offline is really the process. So there's 7 steps to utilizing a LinkedIn strategy for outreach. So the first thing is you have to have an idea of who you're targeting. So what happens is you sit down, we have a planning session, but you can do this on your own. This is an example of building a profile in LinkedIn of saying, okay, people in the United States, these are different industries that they're connected to. this is the company size I want, these are the job titles I want, and I built a profile of 75,000 people. Obviously, I don't want that many people, but it's a starting point. So what you have to ask yourself is, who is the person that refers me business? Who's the person that becomes a client? And who's a person that would benefit from my service? Because they may not all be the same. So what you do is, the short way of doing it is go look at your competition, see who they're targeting, who they're talking to. So once you have an idea of who your client base is and your referral base is, the first thing is you have to sign up for Sales Navigator. It costs, I think, $70 a month or something like that from LinkedIn. You can pay for a year in advance and it's cheaper, but what that does is it gives you access to all of these filters. There's, I think, 25 different ways to isolate and filter down to an audience you want. So this example shows, I was looking for the keyword of India and manufacturing showing up in someone's profile. They had to be in the United States, they had to be an owner and a partner, and I pulled up 4,744 people. So that's a starting point of an audience, and then what you do afterward, that's one thing. So the next thing is, before you go out to market, you have to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is optimized. And there's two things you have to do. Number one is fill out the history, fill out your, if you have any articles that you've published, load them into your profile. If you have a PowerPoint that you've done, load that up. And there's a certain way to utilize the, like 2,000 characters. So use it up. Talk about what your practice is, talk about your pedigree, and at the same point also, this is a graphic banner that you can also change on LinkedIn. So hire a graphic person to make a good banner rather than the freebie that comes with LinkedIn. And the point is that on the next screen, we're going to, I'm sorry, I have it reversed, but it's okay. I'm gonna go forward. The outreach process of LinkedIn is you go one-to-one sending a first tier connection request to people. There's software that can kind of semi-automate that process, and you can do about 70 people a day before you run into LinkedIn's algorithm that sees that it's software. So if you're, I think 150 is really the barrier, but at 70 you're way under the radar. And what you're doing is you're saying to the person, if you're doing even semi-automated, hey, we're connected, because you want to just invite people that you're second degree connected to. I see we share common relationships. We should get together. We should be connected. Something like that. Very, very gentle. And you don't even put in your website address. You know, I happen to do this, but I think we should get together. You'll get 20 to 30% of the people that will respond to you and connect with you. And then what you do is you send a follow-up that says, hey, thanks for connecting, and you try to move it up a notch. And then you have a little known thing in LinkedIn. LinkedIn has InMail. You have to pay them to send emails. But if you're connected to somebody, it's free. So there's a tool in LinkedIn to send a tier 1 to tier 1 message. So you can actually have software that will send out like a newsletter for you once a month. You do it on a daily basis, 100 people a day. If you have a few thousand connections, you can cycle through your connections and actually send an email, which people don't realize you can do. So the whole process is you share articles, you send them a video, you say, hey, you do a hard pitch if you want to. So there's the gentle way of trying the relationship approach, and then the hardcore way of just saying, let me tell you what I got, because it's so good, and it's a numbers game. And so that's the cycle of how you're using LinkedIn. The social media side is if you complement and one part of LinkedIn also is you're constantly putting in thought pieces into your LinkedIn profile, because as you're growing your connections, you might as well give them information that they can share to their own audiences. So one of the ways that you can do that besides your own status update in LinkedIn is to post inside LinkedIn Pulse, which is kind of like their library of informational articles. You can put videos and articles in there, and that gets a lot more exposure. And you can take the same information and put it into your Facebook feed or Twitter, or if you visualize it, put it into Instagram. So the idea here is that it doesn't always have to be original content. You can curate content and be known as the person who puts together information from other sources. I do it myself. I have the newsletter, goes out whenever I'm in the mood, and it will have sometimes a recipe, a tool, and some advice on something to do for digital marketing. And people give me feedback all the time and on any one of those 3 items. So it doesn't always have to be original. Last thing in LinkedIn is community building. You can take, let's say you're, in this example, we're targeting people who work for dental billing and medical billing companies. So we created a group for the same people that we're targeting and positioned this person, that's my wife actually, as the head of the group for dental and medical billing. So they're self-selecting. They want to just identify that this is the business that they're in. It's very easy for them to join a group, and there's already 250 members in her group of people that are in the business. And you don't have to do anything other than create the group, tell people it exists, and then you can post things to the group and invite people to participate in surveys or share knowledge and things like that. So the last thing is advertising. So there's LinkedIn ads and Facebook ads. The difference is a factor of 10. So the dollar that you might spend on a Facebook click will cost about $10 on LinkedIn. But the value of that is that you can take an audience that you have in one area, let's say in LinkedIn, and you can transport it over to Facebook and vice versa, and you can kind of feed them off of each other, because people who may use LinkedIn in one way, you may also be able to get to them on Facebook. So it's a question of, again, it's relationship building and stuff like that. So it's just, you have to know about it. And this is just the roadmap, which is you start with planning, you figure out who your audience is, figure out how you want to present your message so that when they get that first tier connection request and they look at your profile, whatever message you gave them totally matches the profile that you've got. So even though you may do a certain area of law, it may be for outreach purposes, you might change your LinkedIn profile a little bit to match the outreach that you're doing. And then just figure out ways to stay in touch with people at least once a month. And then the last step of it is how you send them a message at some point to say, hey, let's take this offline. Either have a phone call or meet for coffee if it's local, and that's kind of same thing in provisors. And this is a book I wrote with my partner, and I have an extra copy if anybody wants it. You can fight for it. And that is it.